Welcome to chapter 7, the book of Hosea. Now, this chapter we go into Hosea's prophecy and condemnation, actually God's, of the northern kingdom of Israel. Go to a map here, and we can see the southern kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Israel. At the time of Solomon, when he died, his son Rehoboam took this whole area, and then a servant of Solomon rebelled against Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. His name was Jeroboam. It's kind of confusing with the Bohms, but the 10 tribes in the north went with Jeroboam, and he set up his capital, eventually was in Samaria here. So, and the country was biggest part was the Ephraim, which was a hilly country. And Samaria was in between up here, Galilee, and Judea down here. And so when he revolted, then these 10 tribes went with Jeroboam, and Benjamin and Judah stayed with Rehoboam, Judah being the tribe of David. And then Jeroboam in the north didn't want people going down to Jerusalem, so he set up his own priesthood and sacrifices and everything I believe it was in Shechem, and the people in Israel were not allowed to go down to Jerusalem. And these two countries, if you want to call them, they each had a king, warred for hundreds of years between each other. You look at Israel today in the news, I don't know, what are we in the 23rd or something like that, of July of 2023, and there's hundreds of thousands of people that are protesting the government of Israel wanting to change the judiciary system to a place that they would have more control. The judges would have more control over their Congress, but the people don't want that, and hundreds of thousands are coming out against it. Some people think there could be a civil war. If it was, it could have something like this would end up being the case. I'll read now in verse 1, go through the Greek, and then we'll go into the chapter. It begins, En to iasaste me ton Israel, ke apokalifthi e adikia Ephraim, ke ikakia Samarias, oti ergasanto psevdi, ke kleptis prosavton isilthan, ek dediskon listis, enti odo av tu. In my healing Israel, or attempting to heal Israel, then the injustice of Ephraim was uncovered, and the evil of Samaria. You can go to Wikipedia and look up Samaria, and it gives you all sorts of information. I'm not really teaching the history of Samaria, things in the Bible per se, as we're going through it, though I bring these things out. But you can go to other external reference material, and Wikipedia is great for Samaria. And so God is trying to get Israel on the right path, just as when we walk away from God, then He will do His best to get us on the right path, to bring us to Him. But it doesn't always work, of course, because man has free will. Man has Satan against trying to destroy him. And it continues, for they worked falsehoods, pseudia, pseudo, it's a derivative, and a kleptis, a thief, kleptomaniac comes from that, derivative. And a thief entered to him. Now, it could be talking about Jeroboam against Rehoboam. I'm not exactly sure who he's referring to. The injustice of Ephraim was uncovered in the evil of Samaria, things that they were doing that were evil. And so these bad things were happening. Now, the thief entering to him, a robber stripping him in his way, and basically the king caused these bad things to happen by selling the priesthood. And so when he did that, then the whole spiritual essence of Israel was pretty much destroyed. It was not godly in any way. And then in verse 2, so that they should sing together in concert. Now, who is they? Should sing in concert, as one singing in their heart, that I remembered all their evils. Now, that could be the Assyria, the priesthood. It's hard for us today, thousands of years later, to understand exactly who they are, singing together as one singing in their heart, that I remembered all their evils. So God is watching the things going on, and also in us. He sees what we are doing when we walk away and takes note of it. Now, their deliberations encircled them, and the things that we get ourselves into after walking away from God encircles us. And they took place before my face. And people could be proud of their sins, doing things, but yet, and doing it in front of God on purpose. But yet God does see these things. And he says, in their evils, they gladdened the king. Well, the kings in the north didn't mind what they were doing because they did not have the true belief of what God had planned for the Jews. And in their lies, rulers. And committing adultery, all committing adultery are as an oven burning for baking, burning from the flame, and basically burning up something that ruins it. And then from mixing together a steatos until it's being leavened holy, the fat until it's being leavened holy. In the Complutensian Polyglot has leaven, from mixing together leaven until it's being leavened holy. So I'm not exactly sure which one it would be. It could be either one. And then it begins in 5, in the days of our kings, the rulers began to be enraged from out of wine. So the kings were the main things that were bad, this northern kingdom that I believe Hosea is pointing out. He stretched out his hands with pestilent ones, and the king doing evil, with joining in with evil people, pestilent ones. And we look at today, I see in the United States and probably other countries where you have rulers who are stretching out, taking bribes, taking money, which is being accused, the President of the United States is being accused of, and maybe going to a long process of determining whether this was true or not, and so forth. But taking bribes by the rulers is not uncommon. But God does not want it. In verse 6, for their hearts were kindled as an oven, burning, and they're breaking down all the night, and that would be the kings of Israel. Now, in their breaking down all the night is kind of a strange structure there. I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to. If they were breaking down or if they were causing others to break down. And in the morning it was kindled as a flame of fire. They were all heated as an oven, and they devoured their judges. So now the people are the kings devouring their own. It's sort of today you see the same thing going on in the United States. You have one party that is condemning the judges, the Supreme Court, and trying to ruin it so these judges will, I guess, quit or something, and they can put judges that are that are more like what they want them to be, this other party. So it's also happening. All their kings are fallen. There was not one among them calling to me. And you read 2 Kings, and you'll see all the stories of all these kings, and only 4 are mentioned as far as during the time of one actually in Israel, Jeroboam II, but 4 of them down in Judah during his period of time. There was not one among them calling to me. And you can see the President of the United States certainly doesn't call towards God at all, ignores everything that there is with Christians, stays away from them. And so it's a sad state when that's happening, when you have the ruler going the opposite direction than the true way. And Ephraim, Israel or Samaria, is intermixed in his peoples. Now, he could be talking about here, by this time the Assyrians were coming in, and they ended up, I think 40 years later, taking Samaria and all these people in the northern kingdom and scattering them throughout the Assyrian Empire. And then he brought in people from these other areas that the Assyrians had conquered and brought them into Samaria. And it got so bad that these people tried to be like the Jews, and they would believe certain things of the Bible with the law, and then they would also believe things of the gods of the land that they had been taken away from. So these Samaritans were an intermixed people. Could be what it's talking about here. Ephraim is intermixed in his people. Ephraim became a cake baked in hot ashes, not being turned over, burnt, ruined. And strangers ate his strength, but he knew not. And it could be the Assyrians. And gray hairs broke out to him, and he knew not, possibly from the stress. And the insolence of Israel shall be humbled unto his face, and the face who is his, the king. But they turned not towards the Lord their God, and they sought not after him in all these things. Now, Israel shall be humbled unto his face could be God too. Now, Egypt and Assyria were both against each other. Assyria, go back up to this map if it's got it on there. Syria is way up here. Syria over in the northern Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates River. And they would come across, this is called the Fertile Crescent, and come down. And then the Egyptians, which are way down here west of Philistia, would come up and they would war, and they warred at Carchemish on the Euphrates River. And the Assyrian Empire was defeated. Then the Babylonians came up and warred against the Assyrians, and the Assyrian Empire stopped. But the king of Egypt came up, and the king of Judah joined with the Assyrians, but he was defeated. This is all in the Kings. And so in 2 Kings. And verse 11, it continues, and Ephraim was as a mindless dove, not having a heart. Egypt he called upon, and unto Assyria they went. So Israel was in the middle between these two powerful nations, Egypt and Assyria. They would call them one to help against the Assyrians, and the Assyrians to help against the Egypt, went back and forth. And then Judah would get involved sometimes and go up and join with Israel, and other times he would pay Assyria money to attack Israel. So it was a real mess. And then in verse 12, as whenever they shall go, I will put over them my net. So doing these evil things and have all these bad things happening, God's going to put a net over them, and as birds of the heaven, I will lead them down. I will correct them in the hearing of their affliction. Now, correcting them doesn't necessarily mean it was successful, but punishing, doing things to them that would change them. As you can correct your son, and using a spanking, which they did, a rod or a whip or something, doesn't mean they changed. But the correcting is what is the action of doing something. God is going to do it. So there is a purpose for affliction. If you've walked away from God and you're going through affliction, then maybe God is calling you to change your ways and to start reading the Word of God. And I believe the affliction will leave. Now, that's a different affliction than somebody that's being afflicted if they're doing good things and they become a martyr and they're walking with Jesus, but yet they're afflicted. And does God want that? God allows it to happen, obviously, because God allowed Jesus to be afflicted, to go to the cross. In verse 13, it continues, oy vey, woe to them, for they leaped back from me. And Jesus has come ransoming Israel and ransoming us from the power of Satan and the eventual destination of the sinners to go to hell, or Hades. And Jesus has ransomed. He paid the price. But if you reject Jesus, then you're rejecting the ransom. You're going to stay in that prison, just like a king was ransom king Richard the Lionhearted, coming back from the Crusades, and he was taken prisoner by other kingdom, and England finally got the money during the story of Robin Hood, and they ransomed him and got King Richard out of this prison. And if they didn't come up with the money, then King Richard would have stayed there for the rest of his life until he died. Jesus ransoms us, and if we reject it, then we stay in the prison until forever, eternity. Woe to them, for they leap back from me. Wretched are they, for they were impious against me. But I ransomed them, but they spoke ill against me. Lies. That's terrible, and people lie against Jesus, who's died on the cross to deliver them, pay the ransom, but they don't want it. And it's a terrible thing to reject Christ. And they yelled out not to me with their hearts, but only shrieked in their beds. For grain and wine they mutilated themselves. Going for materialism keeps one from going to God. And you want these things and you harm yourself, or sin. And basically any type of sin is a form of mutilation of your own body, because not only will it ravage your body, but your body eventually will die, and the place you go is not going to be pleasant. They were corrected by me, and God has corrected us over and over. I strengthened their arms, and against me they devised wicked things. There again, more even devising wicked things against God on purpose. They returned unto nothing. Over and over, they became as a bow being stretched tight. Over and over, God tries to straighten us out, but they become stretched tight as a bow, and not giving in to the ways of God to change us. And their rulers shall fall by the broadsword. And of course, he's talking about Israel in so many of these places. They're going to fall because of the stupidity of their glosses, glossolalia. The glossary is a derivative. The stupidity of their language, basically, or their tongue, and saying things that were bad. This is the disparagement in the land of Egypt. Now, exactly what he's referring to there is possibly later when Judah is taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. Many of the Jews who escaped and went into Egypt, and they asked Jeremiah if they should go, and Jeremiah said no. The Lord said to stay there, but they went instead, and they went into Egypt and were destroyed even in Egypt. So maybe this is what he's talking about. I'm not really sure there, but bad things happening to Israel. It keeps on going in verse 8, and I think 9 also. The apostasy of Israel more in detail against the northern kingdom. Hope you'll join us in our next video seminar. Until then, God bless.